Welcome back to my channel WWE Universe. The chaos you demanded has arrived. Jon Moxley is back on Monday Night Raw and he didn't come alone. In a stunning, violent twist, he brought a mystery partner that no one saw coming, and together they just set the entire show on fire. You have to see the footage to believe it. Subscribe and hit the bell right now. This changes the game completely. From the very first second the broadcast returned from commercial, the atmosphere inside the arena felt different, heavier, almost charged with anticipation, as if everyone watching could sense that something unpredictable was about to unfold, and then, emerging from the darkness like a force of unrest that refused to be ignored, Jon Moxley appeared, stepping forward into a narrow beam of dim light with that unmistakable wild grin stretched across his face, a look that told the world he wasn't here to make friends or relieve the past, but to disrupt everything in front of him. And yet what made this moment even more unsettling was the unmistakable presence of another figure standing silently beside him, towering, broad-shouldered, and cloaked in shadow, offering no movement, no expression, only the suggestion of imminent destruction waiting to be unleashed. Moxley, now untethered, no longer bound by expectations or traditional allegiances, embodied pure unpredictability, the kind of competitor who thrived in disorder and fed off conflict. But even the most dangerous lone wolf can eventually be cornered or slowed down, which made the real question on everyone's mind not whether Moxley would strike, but who he had chosen to stand with him in this moment, because alliances define wars, and this one felt like the beginning of something far larger than a simple return. As Moxley and his unknown partner advanced down the area, the camera revealed Drew McIntyre trapped against a production crate, still recovering from the chaos that had already erupted earlier in the night, while Cody Rhodes stood nearby, clearly aware that something had gone terribly wrong, and through it all, Moxley remained silent, offering no speech, no explanation, no warning, until he slowly raised his arm and pointed directly at McIntyre, a simple gesture that carried the weight of a declaration. In an instant, the massive figure beside him exploded into motion with startling speed, colliding with McIntyre in a thunderous clothesline that echoed through the arena, the impact alone enough to send a shockwave through everyone watching as McIntyre collapsed to the floor, stunned and overwhelmed by the sheer force behind the attack. Before anyone could react, the towering figure shifted his focus to Cody Rhodes, but instead of striking, he stopped, locking eyes with him in a tense, wordless confrontation, delivering a clear message without lifting a finger, a silent command that this was not his fight to step into, and that any attempt to interfere would come with consequences. With that warning delivered, Moxley surged forward, launching himself at the fallen McIntyre in a relentless flurry of strikes, his movements sharp and aggressive, driven by controlled fury rather than chaos for chaos's sake, as he stomped and hammered down, asserting dominance in a way that left no doubt about his intentions. Reaching into his pocket, Moxley produced a metal chain, a symbol of his unrestrained mindset, wrapping it around his fist and driving it into McIntyre's side with brutal precision. Not lingering, not celebrating, just delivering punishment with purpose, while the crowd watched in stunned disbelief at how quickly the situation had escalated. As the dust began to settle, the shadowed partner finally stepped fully into the light, revealing himself to be Lance Archer, a name that instantly sent a ripple of recognition through longtime fans, because this was no ordinary ally, but the murder hawk monster himself, a man known for leaving destruction in his wake. A competitor whose reputation was built on overwhelming opponents and dominating environments, now standing on WWE soil. Archer let out a deep, primal roar that cut through the noise of the arena, hoisting McIntyre high into the air with alarming ease and driving him down with a devastating blackout onto the hard concrete, a move that served less as a finishing blow and more as a statement, emphasizing that this arrival was not about subtlety or slow build-up, but about immediate impact. Standing together over the fallen McIntyre, Moxley and Archer formed a striking image, one of calculated anarchy paired with raw physical dominance, a leader of chaos alongside his monstrous enforcer, communicating everything they needed to say without a traditional promo or drawn-out explanation. When Moxley finally reached down and grabbed a stray microphone, his words were brief but sharp, cutting straight to the point as he addressed the audience, declaring that the mystery everyone wanted had been revealed, clarifying that this was not about nostalgia or reunions, but about a hostile takeover, an open invitation to anyone bold enough to stand in their way. With that, the two disappeared back into the shadows from which they came, leaving behind a shaken Cody Rhodes, a battered Drew McIntyre, and a WWE landscape that suddenly felt far less stable than it had just minutes earlier. This partnership represents a masterful creative decision, introducing a dangerous external presence directly into the core of WWE programming, because Lance Archer is not simply a backup or muscle for hire, but a destructive force whose philosophy aligns seamlessly with Moxley's belief in tearing down structures and challenging authority, and their shared history outside of WWE lends instant credibility to their alliance, making it feel authentic rather than manufactured. Their past battles and teamwork create a dynamic rooted in mutual respect and shared chaos, instantly elevating the threat they pose, and this move accomplishes several critical objectives at once, beginning with re-establishing Moxley not as a familiar face returning for another run, but as the architect of a new, violent faction that exists beyond established groups and storylines, separate from ongoing alliances like the Bloodline or other power structures that have dominated the scene. Moxley and Archer together feel less like participants in the system and more like a storm crashing into it, unpredictable, uncontrollable, and impossible to ignore, forcing everyone else to react rather than plan, and the question now is not whether they will make an impact, but who will be brave or reckless enough to try and stop them. The ripple effects of this moment will be felt across the roster, as champions, contenders, and rising stars alike must now account for a pair that answers to no one and operates by their own rules, and that sense of looming danger is exactly what makes this debut so compelling. This is why you need to subscribe right now to stay locked in as the fallout unfolds, because every episode from here on out carries the potential for escalation, for unexpected confrontations, and for alliances to be tested under pressure. So hit like, share your thoughts in the comments about who you believe should step up to face this new threat, and prepare yourself, because the underground has arrived, the balance of power has shifted, and Jon Moxley and Lance Archer are just getting started. The shockwaves from that single night did not fade when the show went off the air. Instead, they spread outward, seeping into every corner of the WWE Universe, dominating conversations online, backstage, and among fans who replayed the footage again and again, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Analysts debated whether this was the most dangerous return in recent history, while veterans quietly acknowledged that something fundamental had shifted. This was not just a surprise appearance meant to spike ratings for a week or two. This was the opening chapter of a much larger conflict, one that threatened to tear through the established hierarchy and rewrite the balance of power from the ground up. The following week on Monday Night Raw opened with an uneasy energy. Superstars walked the halls with heightened awareness, glancing over their shoulders, knowing that Moxley and Archer could appear at any moment. There were no flashy entrances, no music cues to offer warning, and that unpredictability alone created fear. Management attempted to maintain control, insisting that Raw would proceed as scheduled. But even their words sounded hollow, because everyone understood that order only exists when chaos allows it to. Drew McIntyre was officially ruled out of action for the night, nursing injuries from the assault, and his absence spoke louder than any statement could have. One of WWE's most resilient warriors had been laid out decisively, and the message was clear: no one was untouchable. Cody Rhodes addressed the situation later that night, standing in the ring with a measured calm that barely concealed his frustration. He spoke about respect for competition, about fighting with honor, and about standing up to those who sought to undermine the locker room. Yet even as he spoke, the crowd sensed hesitation, because Cody had seen that stare from Archer up close, and he understood the warning that had been delivered without words. His promo wasn't just a challenge, it was a declaration that WWE could not afford to let fear dictate its future. The crowd rallied behind him, but there was an undercurrent of doubt, a realization that courage alone might not be enough against a duo built for destruction. Backstage, whispers spread about who might align to counter this emerging threat. Some believed that strength in numbers would be the only solution, while others argued that confronting Moxley on his terms would only feed into his philosophy. Veteran competitors recalled Moxley's past, noting that he thrived when opponents tried to outmatch his brutality instead of outthinking him. Lance Archer, meanwhile, represented a different problem entirely. His size, power, and relentless style meant that even the strongest singles competitors would struggle to withstand him for long. Together, they formed a perfect storm, blending strategic chaos with overwhelming force. When Moxley and Archer finally reappeared, it wasn't in the ring or during a scheduled segment. Instead, the camera caught them in a dim backstage corridor, Moxley leaning casually against a concrete wall, Archer looming behind him like a silent sentinel. Moxley spoke directly into the lens, his tone calm but razor-sharp, explaining that they weren't interested in championships or approval, at least not yet. They were interested in exposure, in revealing who people really were when their comfort zones were stripped away. Archer said nothing, but his presence reinforced every word, a reminder that action would always follow intention. Over the next several weeks, their influence grew without them even wrestling a traditional match. Opponents were attacked after bouts, alliances were disrupted before they could form, and rivalries were derailed by sudden, brutal interruptions. Some superstars tried to confront them head-on, only to be overwhelmed and discarded, while others chose avoidance, hoping to stay out of their line of sight. That avoidance, however, only reinforced Moxley's point, that fear was already winning battles before they even began. Eventually, management was forced to respond. An announcement was made that Moxley and Archer would face consequences if their actions continued unchecked, but even this declaration felt more symbolic than authoritative. When officials attempted to impose fines or suspensions, Moxley dismissed them outright, stating that consequences only mattered to those who believed in the system enforcing them. Archer stood beside him, arms crossed, unmoved, reinforcing the idea that compliance was not part of their vocabulary. As anticipation built toward their first sanctioned match, speculation ran wild about who would step up. Would it be a top champion seeking to protect their reign, a group of rising stars looking to make a name for themselves, or an unlikely alliance formed out of necessity rather than